let's imagine, this is hypothetical, so let's imagine there was like an indigenous tribe who were cut off from human civilization. We're talking about human beings. And let's say that previously they had been hunted by bears who killed some of the children or the weak humans. But they've hunted all those bears to extinction. So this population, this tribe is getting out of control. So it's causing harm to the biodiversity. Maybe it's causing some problems for humans in civilization, whatever. It's causing some damage to the health of the ecosystem, let's say. In that scenario, so if just basically was simply swapping the non-humans with the humans, would you ever be in favor of introducing bears, causing them to be eaten alive, or would that just be completely out of the question? Is there a difference between these scenarios?
There is a bear. Okay, I've been chased by a grizzly bear. And I'm lucky I came out alive.
And you were like, this is such a good thing. This is such a moral good.
Well, I would be in favor of bear reintroduction, the restoration of bears as part of the community of life in some places, but not in other places. Once again, it depends on context. There's bear restoration, grizzly bear restoration going on right now in the Intermountain West of North America. There's eventually going to be polar bear restoration or something because of global climate change and the melting of the polar ice caps. There are places and peoples who've adapted well to bears and were able to avoid conflict with bears. There are other places that don't. I think, but to take your hypothetical, I think if you're talking about a primal people who have deep knowledge of their landscape and the creatures in their landscape, they're far less likely to have problems with bear restoration, practical problems with bear restoration, than city folks who know nothing about those bears and don't know how to manage those issues. I'm not saying there won't be conflicts, but I wouldn't have a problem with bear restoration, and I wouldn't have a problem if someone was harmed by a bear.
So you wouldn't have a problem if we introduced bears for the health of the ecosystem, and we knew it was going to result in some humans being eaten alive?
Well, part of the reason, let me put it like this. I don't value our lives any more than I value the lives of bears. Bears are critically threatened and endangered in some places. And that's been a consequences of our actions. So while bear predation on humans is infinitesimally small, you can't rule it out. But I think our moral obligation to the bears outweighs any possible hypothetical, theoretical harm that might come to humans. Now, if I knew that bear was going after that human, would I intervene to stop that? Absolutely. I don't want anybody in particular, any particular individual to be harmed. But as a theoretical notion, that someone might get harmed sometime in the future, that's not it's a legitimate concern. It's not as persuasive to me as a kind of restorative justice for the bears who we have so harmed.
And Jack, I do want to highlight that even though that's not like possibly the wild animal welfare answer to the question, it's a calculation that our society makes all the time. Like, cars kill people way more than bears do. And we have just made a even not considering other animals in this question at all, just considering our human well-being, we have just accepted the at least 10,000 plus, maybe 100,000 plus. I don't know what order of magnitude it is, but many, many, many people die from car-related injuries every year, and we've accepted their deaths as a result of this other good.
Well, we do what we can to reduce the amount of deaths from car accidents. In the example with rewilding, trophic rewilding, what we're doing is we're purposely causing more of the suffering and death of animals to be eaten alive.
Yeah, but I think that's an action-in-action fallacy to some extent. Like, we are failing to act to stop cars from being a thing.
Well, no, we're trying to though. We're trying to reduce the number of car accidents by having speed limits, using seatbelts,
this gets to the false dichotomy you presented Bill with, though, because you presented him with a choice between introduce bears and they kill lots of people, or don't introduce bears and people run amok.
Oh, no. Because I mean, I guess in the wild animal example, there could be other.
Yeah, exactly.
Other
You
ways
could
in which we can help
reintroduce
as well.
You could reintroduce bears, but also introduce ways to keep them from hurting people if you wanted to.
Right, but Bill isn't in favor of introducing wolves but stopping them from eating the deer. He's in favor of introducing wolves as well, and they eat the deer. So I think it's a fair hypothetical to give.
I mean, I agree with you to some extent. I mean, obviously, philosophically, I'm like more in your camp. It's just, I think it's just interesting to look at how we make these same calculations in different contexts as a society, and like often many of, I question the way we act towards cars, given how many people they kill every year. But many people do not. Many people just think that allowing this system to continue, because it has such a value on it of allowing us to transport ourselves efficiently and various things like that, it's just these deaths are just accepted. And I think it's interesting to compare that, even if I'm not saying that's a justification. I wouldn't say I would reintroduce the bears. I'm just saying that it's interesting to look at that comparison and the attitude that people take of like, well, we really love this good of having cars, but we're not going to say ban all cars until we figure out how cars cannot kill pedestrians, and then we'll reintroduce them. We're saying we're going to keep killing people until we figure out how to stop killing people, but we're just accepting that as a cost of doing business here. And I suppose it's kind of like and I could be wrong, but I kind of see it as like a calculation based on well-being. Like we feel like we're willing to accept the risk that, I'm willing to accept the risk that I might die in a traffic accident because of the benefits to society we get a hold of being able to travel in that way. But I take your point. And perhaps where we can both agree, I think all of us can probably agree, is that if we're going to be acting in ways that, if we're going to do rewilding, if we're going to cause more animals to be eaten alive and increase the number of animals being born, create all of this experience happening, this conscious experience, we certainly have to consider the well-being, consider those experiences when we're trying to decide whether this is something we should do.